Chapter 760, Defeat the Blood Armor in One Strike. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. Of course, some people were still worried. After all, Lin Yue had already been injured gravely and he'd just driven the vampire prince back. This might have worsened his injury. Could he continue fighting? The third royal prince's mask dissipated into shreds of blood chi and scattered away. His red eyes stared at Zhang Yuochen as he huffed. I didn't think you could unleash such a powerful attack while you're so heavily injured. What, are you scared? Zhang Yuochen asked. Ha ha. The third royal prince threw his head back, laughing. Then he said in a shrill voice, I only used 30% of my power in that attack. Even if you could block it, it doesn't mean anything. Zhang Yuochen could tell that the third royal prince's blood armor was extraordinary, so he took another glance. That is, his eyes squinted suddenly. He recognized the 100 Saint blood armor. Long ago, the Sacred Central Empire had received a lot of war booty after defeating the vampires. The 100 Saint blood armor was among this loot. Thus, Zhang Yuochen had seen it with his own eyes before. He was also very clear about its power. All the war booty from the vampires had been locked in the Empire's treasury. Emperor Ming had ordered that no one could use the vampires' weapons, lest they be affected by the blood chi and become bloodthirsty demons. Oh, it's the 100 Saint blood armor. No wonder you're so strong. Zhang Yuochen shook his head and smiled. Even though he recognized it, he still didn't seem to care. However, relying on outside help leads you away from yourself. It's no help for cultivation. Cultivating either martial arts or the holy road is, in the end, cultivating your own body. The third royal prince clearly didn't agree with this. He looked at Zhang Yuochen mockingly and sneered. Really? What can you do about it if I insist on using outside help? At least I'm undefeatable tonight. I will definitely become an heir. You really think no one can defeat the 100 Saint blood armor? Zhang Yuochen asked. Don't be so ignorant, alright? The third royal prince scoffed. He didn't take Zhang Yuochen seriously. I am enough. Zhang Yuochen's eyes sharpened gradually. He slowly lifted the void sword above his head. He gripped the hilt and closed his eyes. At the same time, the heart of sword between his eyebrows spun quickly. It flashed with blinding silver light. Passing through the chi sea, it shot out from between his brows and became one with the void sword. A white beam of sword chi transformed into a pillar of light. It flooded out of the void sword and shot into the sky, crashing against the clouds with a boom. With the sword chi pillar as the heart, a vortex formed. The bloody clouds in the sky started spinning quickly. At that moment, the swords of all the monks within a 100-mile radius of Scroll Mountain all began trembling. They flew towards Scroll Mountain, breaking free from the monks' control. My sword. How can this be? How did my sword fly away? Other than the swords owned by those in the half-saint realm who could control their weapons with their powerful cultivation, all other swords flew out. Whoosh. Whoosh. More than 10,000 swords appeared above Zhang Yuochen. They whizzed around the sword chi, filling the space with wind. Something's off with his sword. The third royal prince stared hard at Zhang Yuochen's void sword. He felt extreme danger and finally, his expression turned serious. 100 Saint contention. The third royal prince spread out his feet. He clenched his hands into tight fists and poured his holy chi into the 100 Saint blood armor. The next moment, 100 blood red saint apparitions surged from the armor. Standing behind him, there were human saints, as well as beastly saints. They all had different appearances. Each apparition uttered different saintly words. The power bursting from them was shocking. It was as if 100 true saints were standing behind the third royal prince. He'd completely become one with their aura. This was only an aura, but it could send a monk of the fish dragon realm to his knees in terror. The third royal prince attacked first. He punched and the 100 saint apparitions flew with the fist, creating a gust of fierce wind. Whoosh! The void sword whistled and flew out of Zhang Yuochen's hand. He formed a sword gesture with his hand and pointed forward, controlling the void sword. A long beam of sword chi trailed behind the void sword like a white chain. At the same time, the thousands of swords also flew out, enveloping the void sword. Boom! Boom! The swords crashed violently against the 100 blood red saint apparitions. Finally, the void sword and the thousands of swords passed through, hitting the third royal prince. The third royal prince roared and spat out a mouthful of blood. It splashed against the 100 Saint blood armor, making it shine even more blindingly. He crossed his arms and blocked his chest. Zhang Yuochen also gritted his teeth. Blood trickled out from his lips. Holy chi continued to pour out of him, pushing his finger to stab forward again. The swords continued to fall down on the third royal prince. After thousands of hits, it finally broke through the 100 Saint blood armor's defense and made a tear squelch. The void sword passed through the third royal prince's arms, stabbed into the armor, and pierced his chest. Blood surged out, completely dyeing the stairs red. The third royal prince flew backwards and landed on the steps halfway down the mountain. Then he kept trolling until he was at the foot of the mountain. Finish. Zhang Yuochen put his void sword away. One hand clutched his chest, while the other gripped the sword hilt as he steadied his swaying body. In the end, he didn't fall down. His back was still as straight as ever as he looked down. All the monks below the mountain felt their souls shake when they saw Lin Yue's handsome figure. He was too powerful. That one strike had left an inextinguishable image of Zhang Yuochen in everyone present. He seemed to be a young sword saint. He was the definition of undefeatable. An elder from the Yin and Yang sect laughed heartily. Not bad. Not bad, as expected of our sword genius from the Yin and Yang sect. He finally showed our power. Even the vampire couldn't take a single hit. His bright voice spread throughout Shentai City. It passed into the ears of the elders of all forces. It sounded like he was bragging. An elder from the moon worship demonic sect sneered. Lin Yue is indeed powerful, but I don't think it has much to do with the Yin and Yang sect. I think the Thousand Bone Empress is the actual powerful one. This voice spread throughout Shentai City without any repressions as well. That's right. Lin Yue is the heir of the Thousand Bone Empress. It's only logical that he defeated the vampire clown with the void sword. The Xuanyi saint of the Four Symbols sect transformed his powerful voice into sound waves and sent them out. He did this to announce to everyone that Lin Yue was the heir of the Thousand Bone Empress. Judging from the current situation, there was no point for the Four Symbols sect, the 8 Trigram sect, and the Tai Kai sect to attend the Sword Technique Conference as long as the Yin and Yang sect had Lin Yue. Would they go to embarrass themselves? If he made everyone aware that Lin Yue was the Thousand Bone Empress heir, the Xuanyi saint was sure that Lin Yue wouldn't be able to attend the Sword Technique Conference anymore. Even if he did, Lin Yue couldn't help the Yin and Yang sect fight for the Sword Pavilion. The Xuanyi saint's words were like a stone causing thousands of ripples and waves. The Yin and Yang sect was in an uproar. Senior brother apprentice Lin Yue is the heir of the Thousand Bone Empress? Did I hear correctly? So, senior brother apprentice Lin Yue has the void sword. No wonder he could summon the 10,000 swords and destroy the vampire's 100 Saint blood armor. Only the void sword can do that. No wonder his cultivation improved so quickly this past year. It's because he received the Thousand Bone Empress inheritance. At this moment, a young monk actually knelt down and started kowtowing towards Scroll Mountain. He couldn't help it. The Thousand Bone Empress was honestly too famous. She was practically a legend. The people were extremely excited just to see her heir. In the clouds, the vampire elder huffed in anger. Failure. Even he hadn't thought that the third royal prince would lose with the 100 Saint blood armor. He reached out and grabbed the third royal prince from his puddle of blood, bringing him into the clouds. Instead of checking the prince's injuries, he started checking the state of the armor. The 100 Saint blood armor's defensive powers depended on the user's cultivation. If a half-saint wore it, the defensive power would be on another level. Even if he just stood there, Zhang Yuochen's void sword still wouldn't be able to pierce it. The higher the user's cultivation, the stronger the blood armor's defensive power. Now, the 100 Saint blood armor had been completely pierced through by the void sword. It was horribly damaged and would need the holy blood of a saint and a decade of repairs to be completely mended. The white-haired elder's features twisted. Jialuogu, he said in a low voice. Disable him. Jialuogu, in his 1000 treasure cassock, stood at the top of Scroll Mountain. He put his hands together in prayer and bowed at the elder. Then he looked towards Zhang Yuochen with his golden Buddha eyes. Master Lin Yue, please give me some tips. Anyone could see that Zhang Yuochen had worsened his injuries in the previous battle. Now, He couldn't even stand completely steadily. How could he keep fighting? But Zhang Yuochen remained composed. He smiled faintly. I'm tired today and don't wish to fight anymore. How about I introduce an opponent to you? With that, Zhang Yuochen pointed down the mountain. Jialuogu's eyes followed his finger and his eyebrow arched involuntarily. His eyes were met with a 9-foot-tall monk in coarse clothing on the bottom of the steps. He was practically a giant and had a huge broadsword to match. He walked towards the top menacingly. Compared to Jialuogu, this man looked more like a butcher than a monk. Muscles bulged on his face and his eyes flashed harshly. How dare a traitor from the Death Zen sect appear in Kunlun's field? Hearing this familiar voice, Huang Yanqin arched an eyebrow and gazed down the mountain as well. When she saw the monk, it dawned on her. It really is Monk Lidai. She knew that Monk Lidai had always followed Zhang Yuochen while in the Thousand Void world. He had been impossible to get rid of, like gum stuck to one's shoe. Even more annoying was that Monk Lidai had always jinxed things. Anyone that he said would die would end up dying. Many people had wanted to sew his lips shut. Jialuogu, I see that your globule is dark and the corners of your lips have turned blue. You might bleed disastrously today. Monk Lidai's booming voice spread in all directions.